Okay, good morning and welcome to this morning's meeting of DMRC. The meeting will be held using the Council's hybrid protocols. Can I remind elected members who are remote to keep their cameras on? If any of the remote participants want to speak, please use your hand, and if you could keep your microphones on mute except when you're speaking. We'll go ahead with the first item, which is apologies and substitutes.
Thank you, Convener. Apologies from Councillor Brenda Durno and Ian McLaren.
Okay, thank you. And any declarations of interest or statements of transparency? Okay, there are none. And the minutes of the previous meeting, that was our meeting on the 6th of January. Was that a correct record?
Yeah.
Okay. Yep. Thanks for that. Minutes of the 6th of January. Agreed. We'll move on to the one item of business today, which is item 4, Gallow Hill Farmhouse, Strathmartin. And I'll ask our planning consultant, Mr. Christensen, to present this item.
Thank you, Convener. Members confirm they can see the slides.
Mr. Christensen, can we just have that? Can you adjust the sound up a little bit? You're quite quiet. Maybe it's at our end. We need to do that. I don't. Can you just maybe
Is that any better?
It's quite quiet online as well.
Okay. I'll take my headphones off. Is that any better?
That's much better. Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Sorry about that. Good morning, members. I'm Paul Christensen of the Development Plan Team, Angus Council, present today as Independent Planning Advisor to the committee. I can confirm that I have had no previous involvement in the application and that I have no conflict of interest relative to the case, applicant or any interested party. The case in front of members of the DMRC seeks review of refusal of an application for planning permission in principle for the erection of a detached dwelling house at Gallow Hill Farmhouse, Strathmartin. The application site measures approximately 1,497 square metres and forms part of the garden ground of the existing residential property at Gallow Hill Farmhouse. An existing access track lies to the north of the site. The public road is to the west. The remaining garden ground associated with Gallow Hill is located to the south, and there are existing farm buildings located to the east. The indicative site plan submitted with the application indicates the dwelling house and parking area would be located to the eastern section of the site, with a new access point formed from the existing public road to the west. Two small garden buildings are proposed to be removed from the site. The submitted application form also indicates the dwelling would be connected to the public water supply network. Foul drainage would be directed to a septic tank, which would discharge to land via soakaway, and surface water drainage would be dealt with by SUDS. Looking at the slides, the slide in front of you shows the location plan of the site marked in red. To the east, it shows the Gallow Hill farm buildings, with Gallow Hill Farmhouse to the southeast. The C7 road, which links Bridgefoot to Kirkton of Auchterhouse, lies to the west, with the access track, farm access track, to the north. The site layout plan in front of members shows again the site marked out in red. It shows the indicative area of where the new house is to be proposed, and it shows in red the two small garden buildings that will be removed from the site. The new access from the public road is shown where my cursor is here. It's lying to the south of the site. The slide now shows the proposed road access visibility display. It shows the new access again where my cursor is showing. It shows a 3 metre wide access point to the site, proposed site, with the visibility sight lines 250 metres in either direction to the north and south. Picture in front of members shows the application site. It shows the area which is currently identified as garden ground in the application form. You can see Gallow Hill Farmhouse to the south, to the sort of the far right of this image. Straight in front of members with the green door are the existing farm buildings that are located to the east of the application site. And just where my cursor is, you can see the two small buildings that will be demolished as part of the proposal. Post and wire fence to the south with the public road beyond, and a hedge delineating the site on the northern side with a public farm track beyond. Closer image of the northern boundary again shows this hedge, shows the farm access track, and there's obviously a ditch just below that, and then you can see that again in front of you the farm buildings. The southern boundary, it shows that it's an open nature. There are there's some trees, and then it extends out into additional gardening ground area associated with Gallow Hill Farmhouse. Just beyond the eastern boundary delineated by a post and wire fence, but you can see here the farm buildings that would be still in place, and it shows that they're obviously not utilised at the moment, but you obviously see from the committee report there were some concerns raised by environmental health in relation to the potential future use of those buildings. The western boundary is the C7 road, which links Bridgefoot to Skirton House. The post and wire fence is obviously the immediate boundary for the application site. And that concludes the presentation, members. The case officer report, the report of handling, notice of review, grounds of appeal, and other information is detailed in the papers in front of you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Christensen. Are there any questions for Mr. Christensen? Oh, apologies. I can see a question from Councillor Doran.
And Councillor Beattie.
And there's one from Councillor Beattie, because Councillor Doran's up as 2 in my list. I can't see Councillor Beattie. So, Councillor Beattie first, if you could give your question. Thank you.
Thanks, Convener. Can I ask, can you explain why this is not a brownfield site? And can you confirm that even if it was in itself, this is not necessarily a sufficient reason for its redevelopment?
Thank you, Councillor Beattie. Yeah, the application site is not a brownfield site on the basis that the site itself is gardening ground. It's in effect it's green land. Any brownfield element, we're talking about 2 incidental, small, if you like, sheds. They're really no more than that.
Yeah, thanks for that response, Mr. Christensen, because that was certainly a question that was on my mind was what do you need to have to make something brownfield? And if I guess what we're saying is the buildings are inconsequential buildings, effectively.
I think that's fair, Convener. I think it would need to be something more significant, where you would need some remedial action. If there had been significant downtakings, involved, and then some remedial action required. But in this case, it's as you say, it's what I would determine to be sort of inconsequential buildings that would be removed.
Thanks for that. And Councillor, are you satisfied with that answer, Councillor Beattie?
Yeah, I've got a supplementary, if that's okay.
Okay, on you go.
Yeah, it's this application seems to lie entirely within the curtilage of the Gallow Hill Farm house. So it's in a garden. Is it not the case though that this would not constitute a gap site?
It's probably a good point to raise, Councillor Beattie. You will note from the report of handling that we obviously there's two policy bases. There's the policy TC2 in the current Angus Local Development Plan, and there's now National Planning Framework for Policy 17, which relates to rural housing. The report of handling clearly sets out the reasoning why this site would not constitute a gap site. They determined even if policy TC2 was applied, it wouldn't constitute a gap site. Notwithstanding that, the report of handling sets out, obviously, there are elements of the new policy of NPF 4 policy 17 which are aligned with policy TC2 in relation to things like essential worker housing and brownfield redevelopment. However, there are parts of policy do not align with policy TC2, and that relates to the greenfield elements of policy TC2, such as the gap site, the rounding off of building groups, etc. Because NPF 4 policy 17 is the newer development plan policy, that is the policy that should be being considered. So those elements of TC2 which do not correlate with NPF 4 policy 17 are basically set aside and shouldn't be applied at this time. And I think that's set out quite clearly within the report of handling. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, thanks.
I'm sorry, it was a long way of getting there. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Mr. Christensen. And Councillor Doran, sorry, apologies for the delay. I had missed Councillor Beattie's hand up the first time, so on you go.
No, don't worry. I think we both put it up at the same time, and it had a kind of way in ordering it. And a couple of questions that I had have just been answered, so those are things that I wanted to raise. But additionally, this is an application that has there's applications previously been brought forward on this site that had been refused, in part relating to the fact that they hadn't proved that there isn't a flooding risk. And I can see that in this new application, that's also been noted as one of the reasons why officers refused it. Now, what I've seen before at previous DMRCs is that if there's additional information that is included within the appeal information that wasn't included with the original, we've been asked to choose whether or not to include that. Now, a notice on the appeal information, there's further discussion about flooding within that, but I don't know if that constitutes as additional information or if it's just additional explanations of what already was there. To me, that's not quite clear. And my worry is that around that potential flooding risk, and have they answered the questions and queries that need to be answered around proving that there isn't a flood risk on this site? Because for me, that's a really big question around it. That might be quite complicated a question, but that it's around the flooding risk, whether there's new information been put into this appeal, and whether that's been satisfied.
Can you answer that one, Mr. Christensen? Because I certainly noted the concerns about flooding in the papers.
I'll give it my best shot. So my certainly interpretation of reading the papers was that it was further clarification. I think what the issue seems to be that obviously there's an area. It's an area of potential flood risk from surface water on the SEPA flood maps, and I think as far as I'm aware, that obviously I think that there was just further clarification given to that in the appeal statement. It would obviously be up to members whether they wish to request further information from the applicant, and you can obviously do that if you so wanted to do so.
Thanks, Mr. Christensen. I don't know, we've got Mr. Barnes in the chamber. Do you want to add anything on the flood risk situation?
Thanks, Convener. I think so. A flood risk assessment has not been submitted, and it would need to be submitted if members thought of taking it any further forward.
Yeah. Thanks for clarifying that. So I think Mr. Barnes just saying that if we were minded to progress this one, then we would need to request a flood information from the applicant, which is not here. So any further questions? I've got Councillor Nicholl in the chamber.
Thank you, Convener. Mr. Christensen, I don't know whether it's a question or a comment, but I'm aware with the Bridgefoot area that there is houses periodically, very seldom, do get flooded by surface water, extensive rains and everything, but there's a lot of the properties don't get flooded. And whether this site is just blanketed with properties that do get flooded and this one site doesn't get flooded. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholl. Yeah, I'm not sure if I can answer that in sort of any great detail. All I can say is that the application or part of the site to the south is shown as a potential at risk of surface water. Policy 22 in MPF 4 clearly sets out that you know, potential risk from flood surface water needs to be considered and should be avoided where possible. So I think it's just that's all I really can add to that, Councillor Nicholl.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Can I maybe direct a question to Mr. Petrie from Environmental Health, because there were some concerns raised there. If he could maybe just articulate what the issues were there. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. Can you hear me okay?
Hearing you loud and clear.
Thank you. The concerns we have is, whilst the adjacent steading is derelict, it still has a legal right to be there and it can be brought into use at any time. And we know from experience that these type of facilities, as close to residential properties as this will be, could lead to future complaints. That's really where our concerns lie with this one.
And that would, the issue there would be if the house was approved and then they then made complaints about an agricultural building close by, that would be a complaint that we would have to take seriously.
Correct. We would have to investigate it and potentially take enforcement action which limited the existing building's use. Yeah,
so that is a potential issue. Okay, we've got quite a few issues here. I guess probably if I could come maybe back to Mr. Christensen and ask him. So MPF 4 policy 17 is pretty clear that you can't subdivide garden ground. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct, Convener. There's quite sets out sort of the clear circumstances where a house would be deemed appropriate in the rural area. It sets out quite clearly what the considerations would be.
And I mean, clearly, if I don't know whether this would change it, but if there had been a substantial building in the garden ground, would that change that view or not?
I guess it depends on what kind of building we're talking about. If it was a significant building and which we could then deem that the site was brownfield, that there may have been a different consideration of the application in terms of the type of site it was.
Yeah, okay. So if there had been, let's say, a significant, let's say, an old farm building, stone built, that was crumbling down, we could have regarded it as brownfield, and therefore that changes the decision, perhaps. I think maybe just go round the elected members and just get their views on this one, and maybe start with Councillor Nicholl, who's in the chamber.
Thank you, Convener.
Sorry, Councillor. Is it
a view from members as to whether I'm likely to tear them down or with further information? Is that really what you're trying to?
I think we, you know, if members were minded to uphold the appeal, we clearly need further information on flooding. However, if members are of the view that the reference to MPF 417 makes a decision we could make now, then clearly we don't need to ask for the information on flooding. So I think I'm just trying to tease out what members are currently thinking. So it's just to clarify, if you were, you know, if you feel that you were minded at some point to uphold the appeal, We would still have to ask for additional information because we need to clarify the flooding issue. But if you're minded to refuse the appeal on the information you have so far, that would be possible. That's kind of what I'm saying. I mean, if that's clear.
Thank you, Convener. As regards the flooding, I know there is properties that time to time do get flooded in the area. This is maybe a property that never gets flooded. That would have to be sort of, in the past, this site, we would have passed it, but the new NFP4 policy 17 is strictly against it, and I don't know how much we can argue against it, you know, and would speak with Mr. Christensen, etc., about the way forward with this one. So we would definitely need more information, I would say. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Nicholl. Councillor Beattie.
Thanks, Convener. I'm minded to refuse the appeal. It's not been determined that this is a brownfield site, so it wouldn't qualify on that, and it's not a gap site. So I think that's two things that, you know, that go against it. And the flooding, you know, I don't think that really becomes an issue now.
Sorry, Convener, please can I interrupt? Please could the committee determine if they require further information?
That's the first recommendation on the report.
Well, potentially we do need further information. If the question is, if we were minded to uphold the appeal, we would need more information. It depends on, for me, it depends on your view about how you see this application in terms of policy 17. If your view is it contravenes policy 17, then we have to reject the appeal. I think that's kind of where I am. If you're of the view that you could see a reason for approving the appeal, then we would then have to ask the applicant to do the flood work. But if your view is that even if the flood survey was done and it looked perfectly okay, we would still have to refuse it if you felt that it contravened item 17 or policy 17. So what I'm trying to do is trying to get the views of members on policy 17. And if there's a clear view that it should be rejected on policy 17, then we don't need to concern ourselves about the flood issue. That's kind of where I am.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think, though, members don't need to indicate their position with regard to the determination, or they just need to have a view as to whether or not there's further information required. That may well hint at what their view is, but that's the question for members. Do they think they require further information?
Okay, so do you think you need further information, Councillor Nicholl?
Sorry. Further procedure is the technical term for that.
Further procedure.
Regards to this NFP policy, it states clearly that it is against policy, and I think it would be very difficult to argue that it was in policy, so I'd be not requiring any more information.
Councillor Beattie?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Councillor Nicholl. I don't need any further information.
Okay, and Councillor Dorn.
So, in answer to the question of further information, yes, I feel that would be needed to be answered for any kind of determination of that. To me, the flooding is the biggest question. But if you're asking for an indication of where I am at the minute, then my would be to kind of refuse this appeal, because I also think it doesn't comply with the other policy that we have discussed, policy 17, the brownfield site.
Yeah, so you don't need further information to make your decision, effectively.
Yeah, if that depends on which way we're asking the question, but yeah.
Bill, your mic's off.
the policy to the reference to policy 17, I think, is pretty clear. There's not a substantial building, therefore it's not brownfield. It's a division of garden ground, and that is contrary to MPF4 policy 17. So I don't need further information. So are we all minded to refuse the appeal on the basis of what's in the papers in front of us? Yeah, I do feel there is an issue there where I think the garden is, I think as the report from the agent says, it's too large to be a garden and it's too small to be of agricultural use. But you know, the policy MPF4 policy 17 is quite clear that you can't divide garden ground in a rural setting. So that's really fairly black and white, and the only possible way out of that would have been if there had been if it could be classed as brownfield, and I think from the pictures we've seen, it's not brownfield. It's as we said, fairly inconsequential buildings in the garden. So I think really just to summarise our situation, planning application 24/00417/PPPL, we are now to reject the appeal for the information that's in the papers in front of us. So I think that's the end of the meeting today, and thanks very much for your attendance.
Stop the live stream, please.